The Constitution is not a self-enforcing document. The Constitution is not a self-enforcing document. I had a mentor whose name was Howard Phillips. He served in the Nixon administration. He was a wonderful friend to me. And that's one of the things he used to say to me. The Constitution is not a self-enforcing document. It's a wonderful document. It's a terrific document, but the words are not going to leap off the page and defend us. They're not going to, so the Constitution actually needs champions. It needs an informed and committed citizenry to take it seriously, to understand its message, to understand its content, to understand the biblical principles on which it's founded, and to articulate and defend it. That's what it needs. It needs, in a word, it needs champions. And that's why I'm happy to be with this group tonight, because you, in fact, are the champions. You are the champions, and you need to see yourself that way, and you need to recruit other champions, because we are in an age, as the gentleman said in the prayer, which I really appreciated, we are in a very dangerous time. We're in a time of lawlessness, and we're in a time of deceit, terrible, horrible deceit. So it is absolutely important for us to know the Constitution, to know the principles on which it's founded, and to be able to articulate a defense and to convince others to do that as well. So I'm going to spend a few minutes tonight talking at you, just not very long, I hope, and then I really would like to hear from you. I'd like to take questions, and because just as much as you might want to learn from me, I'd like to learn from you. Okay, so back in the book of Hosea, 4th chapter, the 6th verse, the prophet says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. My people perish for lack of knowledge." Now, fast forward about 2 millennia later, and Thomas Jefferson, in a letter to a friend, said a very similar thing. He said, "If a nation desires to be ignorant and free, it desires what never was and never will be." Let me say that. It's a nice little piece of poetry. Let me say it again. If a nation decides to be ignorant and free, it desires what never was and never will be. We will not be able to recover our rights unless we know what they are, and to make a defense of them, to know where to find them, to know how to articulate them. This is extremely important. Jefferson, in the Declaration of Independence, said, and you probably remember this phrase, "We hold these truths to be somebody say that was, "We hold these truths to be," somewhere along your line in your life, somebody thought that was important for you to memorize, so you probably did, so that's excellent. "We hold these truths to be self-evident," and then he went and listed 5 self-evident truths. Now let's just talk for a second about, well, I was going to talk about what self-evident means. Let's talk first about what truth means. We live in an age, again, as the prayer said, we live in an age where we don't even understand what truth is. We talk about, if you turn into, what's the program, The View or whatever, you hear people talk about your truth. That's your truth, Tom, it's my truth. Our founders would have laughed at something like that. Our founders knew that the truth was a fixed thing, was an absolute thing. It was objected to us. It didn't depend on how Antonio feels. His feelings don't make the truth. The truth is outside of him and outside of me. It's out there, and so it's objective. It doesn't depend on how we feel. So we have to understand that our founders and our system of government, our philosophy of government, is based on the fact that our founders said these are truths. And they're not only truths, they're self-evident truths. They're truths that are, how can I say, are so true, are so manifest, are so clear, are so patent, are so obvious that we're not even going to subject them to argumentation. We're not going to defend them. We're just going to declare them. Okay? We hold these truths to be self-evident. And the very first self-evident truth is there is an almighty creator God. There is an almighty creator God. That's a self-evident. That's the first underlying principle of American government. Let that sink in a minute. The very first underlying self-evident truth of American government is that there is a God. Of course, he's not talked about in our public square or in our schools or whatever. And that's why we have a crime problem, by the way. But the very first self-evident truth is there's a creator God. That he said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men have evolved equal, right? All men have evolved equal. Thank you. All men are created equal. Right, it's a very different word and a very different circumstance, right? A very different conclusion. All right, then he said that our rights come from that God. The second self-evident truth is that our rights to life, liberty, property come from that God. They're not privileges of government. They're gifts of God. They're part of His created order. Then the third self-evident truth is the purpose of government. And you ask anybody that walks up your driveway, knocks on your door, wants your vote, wants your money, wants your support, ask them this question: what's the purpose of government? And then do the best you can to shut up and listen to their answer. Don't help them. What's the purpose of government? You'll get a lot of crazy socialist type answers if you ask that question. But what did Jefferson say in the Declaration? It's the third self-evident truth. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So the purpose of government is to secure God-given rights. So let's review. There is a God. Say this with me. There is a God.
There is a God.
Our rights come from Him.
Our rights come from Him.
The purpose of civil government is to protect God-given rights.
Is to protect God-given rights.
Let's do it again. There is a God.
There is a God.
Our rights come from Him.
Our rights come from Him.
And the purpose of civil government
And the purpose of civil government
is to protect God-given rights.
is to protect God-given rights.
That's the first three. Then he comes to the fourth. The fourth self-evident truth. We need a constitution. The fourth self-evident truth is, thank you very much, is that government is by consent of the governed. Thank you. Is the government, the just government, derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. So how does the governed give its consent to government? How do we do that? Well, we do that through this document. I hold in my hands a copy of the Maryland Constitution. I could also be holding a copy of the U.S. Constitution as well, but this is the Constitution of Maryland. This is the vehicle by which we declare to our government and say, this is the deal. This constitutes our consent. This is what we're consenting, you're allowed to do. These are the powers that we give you, right? So you might then say, if the government acts within the confines of this document, it has our consent, right? It has our consent. It's valid. It's legitimate. It has legitimate jurisdiction. It has authority. But if it acts outside the bounds of this document, it doesn't have our consent and therefore loses its legitimacy. It loses its authority. Because again, this is the document, right? All right, so for the past 2 years, we have lived under horrible, notorious, obnoxious, blatant violations of this document. Folks, the lockdowns, the mandates, the edicts, the orders, the proclamations, whatever you want to call them, none of them were lawful. None of them were, every one of them was outside the bounds of this document. Every one of them. They're all unlawful. And by the way, it doesn't matter what you might have thought of what they called the science of it. As far as I was concerned, the science, I'm not going to hide my feelings here, but the science was non-science, it was nonsense, it was self-contradictory, it was absurd. It still is, it still is. But even, here's my point, even if you believed that the science was perfect, was absolutely perfect, it was still not lawful.
Political science.
It doesn't, thank you. It doesn't matter what the science was. These things were not lawful. They did not have the authority to do these things. Now, what they wanted to make you think over this time period was that, well, see, don't you see we have an emergency going on? We have an emergency. We have a pandemic. So we're going to set this aside. We'll set this aside. No, and they used, by the way, the power of government. They used media. They used all their weapons to convince you that, well, we have to set this aside because we have this emergency. You can never set this aside. As a matter of fact, Article 44 of the Maryland Declaration of Rights, the Maryland Declaration of Rights is the state equivalent of the U.S. Bill of Rights. Okay, when I say the Maryland Declaration of Rights, it's the first part of this document. Right? So the Bill of Rights of Maryland comes at the beginning of the Constitution, unlike in the federal, it comes to the end. Okay? Article 44 of the Bill of Rights of the Maryland Declaration of Rights says this. It says the provisions of the Constitution of the United States and of this state, being Maryland, apply as well as in times of war as in times of peace, and no deviation therefrom or violation thereof based on a plea of necessity or any other plea is valid. Folks, what could be more on point? Forgive me, but let me just say that to you again. The provisions of the Constitution of the United States and of this state apply as well in times of wars and times of peace, and no violation thereof or deviation therefrom based on a plea of necessity like a pandemic or an emergency or any other plea is valid. All of it was unlawful. All of it. Folks, I'm running for Attorney General because unless this is redressed, unless the people who misuse the police power of the state to lock you in your house, to tell you you couldn't run your business. How many people in here had their business interrupted one way or another, or worked for a company that had their business interrupted? None of that was lawful. All of that was unconstitutional. I'm running for Attorney General because unless that is redressed, it's going to continue and it's going to happen again. Do you think they're finished with you?
No.
Do you think they're done with you? They're not done with you. We're in a state of war. I believe actually that this is what World War III looks like. This is what World War III looks like. Our country has been attacked. Let me ask you to consider this. I'm going to be quiet a bit here. Let me ask you to consider this. If your country was involved in a war, what you and I might call a regular war, what would you expect your enemy to do? There are certain things I think you would expect your enemy to try to do. They would try to, for one thing, to destroy your cities or to make your cities unsafe places to work and unsafe places to live, right? They might also want to make your enemy would want to make your borders porous, right? You wouldn't be able to protect your borders. Your enemy would do that to you. Your enemy would try to take over your public information system and use it to their own ends, put their propaganda out, and they would probably want to censor and surveil your people. Right? This is what an enemy would do. An enemy would try to ruin your economy, take away your livelihood, make your life miserable. All these things are what an enemy would do. So then let me ask you to see where I'm going with this. If somebody is doing this, aren't they your enemy?
Yeah.
We are living in a state of war where the enemy is, in many cases, the agents and the agencies of government. We have been attacked by our own government. We need to face up to that. I hear so many news reports that frustrate me because they come from a standpoint of like, well, see how stupid they're being. See how incompetent this is. See how incompetent they are, and I'm looking for the word. See how senile they are. This is a matter of senility, right? No, it's not. I mean, there might be people involved who are senile, but that's not what's going on. This is not some stupid accident that's happening because our government people are not smart enough to do the right thing. They don't want to do the right thing. They want you to fail. They want our enemy. They want our culture to disintegrate. They want to take over not only our economy. They want to destroy this Constitution. They want you to not know this. Folks, there are two law schools in Maryland. The University of Baltimore and the University of Maryland Law School. I went to one of them about 150 years ago. But neither of those laws, everybody that graduates from those law schools, by the way, takes an oath to protect and defend this document, the Maryland Constitution, assuming that they pass the bar and enter into the practice of law. They take an oath to this document. Folks, neither of those law schools for the past 50 years have had a course of study on the Maryland Constitution. Do you think that's an oversight? Let that sink in. Neither of law school in Maryland has a course of study in the Maryland Constitution, yet they all take an oath to it. So fast forward, and your business is shut down, and you go to your attorney, and he doesn't know Article 44 because he's never read it. Your attorney is incompetent and can't do the job, can't help you because he's not prepared. And he's not prepared because the law schools have unprepared him or her. We are at war. We need to act like we are at war. We need to understand things like we are at war. We need to stop thinking that these things that are happening to us are results of senility or incompetence or stupidity. They are not. They are not. They're a matter of war. Again, I'm running for Attorney General of Maryland because I want to redress these grievances. I want to bring people who are committing these crimes. Look, these state's attorneys that have been put in by many people argued by George Soros, by others, by funding these people who have been supported to become state's attorneys or U.S. attorneys, are not prosecuting the law. They're letting people go. This again is an act of war. This is not incompetence. This is not stupidity. This is dangerous. It's dangerous, but it's not stupid. It's very well planned. And again, folks, I ask for your support, and I ask for your support of all those who are constitutionally minded, who are running for office. If you don't know this document, then I would challenge you. The first thing you might want to do is to get yourself knowledgeable about this, because the reason they've been able to do this to us is because we don't know it. Not even our attorneys don't know it. So we don't know what we need to know to do the job that we need to do, right? So I had a high school debate teacher who used to say, the result of effective speech is action. The result of effective speech is action. So if the words that I say to you tonight are going to be worth anything, it's not just going to be making you have a good, warm, fuzzy feeling when you drive home. It's only going to matter if you do something. You need to do something, or my speech was a failure. So what I'm going to ask you to do is two things. Number one, I've already mentioned, if you don't know your rights, if you don't know where to find them, how to articulate them, learn that, please. On the back of this I have some other copies of this if you'd like, this booklet. But Institute of the Constitution is a group that I've been associated with for 25 years that teaches the Maryland Constitution and the U.S. Constitution and the biblical principles that underlie it, etc. So please, if you wonder that you might not be prepared for what is facing you, please avail yourself of that, okay? That's one thing I'd ask. And the second thing I'd ask is, please help me to become the Attorney General of Maryland. I swear to you, I promise to you, that I will prosecute those who have misused the police power of the state to violate your rights. Yes, I'm talking about Governor Hogan. Yes, I'm talking about county executives. Yes, I'm talking about health department officials. Yes, I'm talking about some law enforcement officials who have violated your rights. Some stupidly, but some very, very purposefully have done that. I will do everything I can to bring those people to justice. I will do everything I can with the power of the Attorney General's office to investigate our election system and make sure that it's fair and open and free. And anyone who has criminally abused the election process or has falsified election results will be prosecuted. I will prosecute them.
Thank you, Mike.
I will be your attorney before school boards. I want to be your attorney before school boards, where school boards are violating the rights of parents. I want to start a task force, as a matter of fact, in the Attorney General's office to accomplish that, and also to accomplish border security. And we're not on the southern border here in Maryland, but we are affected by it. And illegal action and human trafficking is happening here. And I will start a task force to investigate that and to panel grand juries to attack that as well.